It's already winter weather, although...
Yeah, are you okay?
Yeah, am I right, Cherry? Lord knows we can't trust Michael.
Oh, gosh.
Uh,
I can't
Oh,
believe
see?
you walked into the shot.
I
Shouldn't
did.
you be crawling from the bottom so that no one will see you? Yeah, you're going to hurt yourself. There's broken ornaments
Great. Now we're
everywhere.
going to go to the emergency room. There you go.
I think we should start.
All right.
Because this is about as jovial as I'm going to be, I think. So.
Should I be concerned?
No, I'm
Okay.
just saying in general,
Oh, you're going to be so happy by the time we're done with this.
I can't wait.
Oh.
All right, let's start. We ready, Michael? All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Big Idea Podcast. My name is Eric Bramlett. I am joined by...
Tammy Melchien.
How you doing, Tammy?
I'm great.
Great. That's awesome. I'm kind of on my trajectory is less jovial than, like, say, a minute
Let's
ago.
take a lot of time
and
on
it's
this part, okay?
moving, It's moving down. So I'm going to really need you to pick me up, pick all of this up. We're going to talk about something that makes people happy.
We are themselves.
That's right, because it's not from them, it's for them, right?
Yes.
We are going to be fashioning a 4-week series called Genetically Generous. And, this is kind of fun because, in a way, this is the trial run for a way of thinking about generosity that we are in the process of shaping kind of as a church, right?
So either it's going to be fantastic or
we're never going to do it this way again.
but
I
we
hope
think it's
the
going to be
former.
the former.
Yeah, fantastic. So why don't you talk a little bit, Tammy, about where the series is headed and what some of the premises are that the series
right.
tries to make and how it works.
Well, how this concept came about is can I name the attender?
You can.
Okay.
It's okay with me.
We have an attender, one of our leadership commission people, Eddie Yoon, who has just a remarkable track record in business, and he writes for the Harvard Business Review and all this. But he had this concept that he started thinking about what he often does for businesses and corporations about how you could apply some of that same thinking to the church, and in particular this area of generosity. And so you have this premise that we are wired for generosity because we're made in the image of a generous God. And actually, if you just even do a Google search on wired for generosity, you'll find there's a lot of journal articles from psychology to science to that actually say that as well.
Sure, they support the idea that there are ways in which we are
Yes.
more disposed to be generous depending on our
Yes.
personalities.
Yes. Or just saying that we are naturally wired for, like, there
Yes.
is a desire in us to be generous.
Yes.
And I think that reflects part of the image of God in us. And so Eddie started thinking, okay, we are all wired for generosity, but perhaps we're wired in different ways. And so many marketers and businesses and that they have all of this data that they can use to try to basically figure out your tendencies and stuff like that. And so he began looking at that. And so some of you may remember we asked the whole staff to take and our leaders to take this generosity survey that helped feed some of the data that Eddie was then able to come up with 6 distinct profiles of different ways that people are wired for generosity. And so that's what this series is going to be about. And we're hoping to encourage people both to see that they are, the way that they naturally want to be generous is a reflection of the image of God in them. And so to encourage them in that, but also challenge them to maybe think beyond that and how could they actually grow beyond their natural inclinations.
Well, and I think too, when you've got six profiles, you got 6 profiles. So you also have, I think sometimes we walk into a series like this, or we walk in and we make some either assumptions or just the way in which we're presenting the material might feel like to someone whose profile doesn't exactly match what it looks like we're saying, that there's not room for them, or that, that doesn't really work for me, or I'm not really motivated by that. And I think, one of the hopes of this, I think, is that people will see something that that when they, work on their profile, figure out what that is, that it actually is uplifting and it's good, and it's like, oh, that is me. That is how I respond. And so if that is me and that's a good thing, like you said, how can I grow in that? As opposed to maybe, okay, well, I don't really respond to that the way in which we're talking about that, and so therefore I'm not generous, or therefore there's not a place for me at the table. So I think it's exciting. I think it's going to be really good, and it's 4 weeks worth.
And people always love learning about themselves. I think that's part of the premise in this. In some ways, this is like taking a personality profile. And people are always like,
oh yeah, I want to know about me.
How I
I know about you, but what do you think of me?
Yeah.
No, that's true. I think it's also worth mentioning within the construct of what we'll be brainstorming that this within this series is also the conclusion of the One Initiative.
Yeah.
And we're celebrating that, and we're gearing toward just a big gift Sunday on March 18th, the third week of the 4 weeks, so we're moving in that direction as well, and definitely making room for that within the construct of the series. All right, well, let's talk about week 1. Where are we headed?
Eric's complaining about how heavy
Oh,
this
it's
map is.
It is a book. Let's not
look.
kid anybody.
It's only one page, though. That made it a lot bigger.
You're
than
saying
normal.
because it's not double-sided.
Yeah, because it's not double-sided. Sorry.
Yeah, well.
That wasn't my fault.
No, it wasn't. It's just...
All right.
My arms
so
work out in.
week 1 is when we're going to focus on Wired for Generosity. And so this is the week where we're going to talk about how we are created in the image of God and therefore wired to be like him in that God is a generous God, so we are generous human beings. And so this will be the theological underpinning for the whole series in this week 1. We're actually not going to we're going to tease the profiles.
Okay.
And tease the little quiz to figure out your profile, but we're not actually going to unveil that in week 1. That's going to be our little bit of tease to get people to come back for week 2. So we will let them know when you come back next week, you're going to have a chance to figure out your profile.
So
and
next
learn more
week,
about
there's
it.
going to be a test. No,
Yes.
we won't say it that way, right?
Probably not.
Yeah.
We'll make it sound much more exciting.
much more interesting.
So that's where we're going with week 1. See, it's a thick thing, but look how fast I just went through that.
Well,
week.
yeah, but I mean, you just brushed by like 3-4 pages. I mean, that's pretty intense.
Is there anything else you don't feel like you know?
I
yet?
don't know. God is love is pretty big in this one. I mean, right?
Yeah.
God is love. Love is generosity. God so loved the world that he gave.
Generosity is the impulse of love, I think is the way we talk
Yes.
about it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, So all of that, obviously, and we may touch on, I just find it interesting and, we talk about how the ultimate act of generosity was God giving of himself and dying on the cross. And, when you look, it's a passage I don't think we typically ever look at, but, that passage that describes the interaction Jesus had with the 2 thieves.
Thieves on the cross.
In most modern translations, it just calls them criminals, but tradition-wise, it often calls them thieves. And I feel like there's an interesting word picture or metaphor there of thinking of the greatest giver hanging between the 2 greatest, two takers. 2
very famous
takers.
thieves. Yeah.
Yeah, and yet his generosity even extends to the one who would receive it there. And so, I don't know, as we're shaping this, I thought there could be something interesting there. So that may be a way we talk about this too.
And I would say, I mean, it's revolutionary to think in terms of the image of God translating into generosity in this way. Because I don't think we think about that. I think we think about like sort of a different kind of genetic makeup. We think about, the human man God, all of that, kind of trying to figure out what it means to be created in the image of God. But I don't know that we necessarily apply that to this idea that
Generosity.
we are wired for generosity.
Yep.
So that's exciting. I love it. All right.
All
well,
right.
we've teased it. It's coming
So
next week.
here
So
we
week
come
2,
to
here it
week
is.
2.
Generosity
And we-
profiles.
Yes, as we were trying to decide, so we have 6 of these, and we were trying to say, okay, do we focus on 2 a week or what? But we were a little concerned that 2, then you also might feel like, oh, we already talked about mine. I don't need,
Right.
And those next 3 weeks might feel all the same if we do it that way. So we decided we are going to go for it and try to cover all 6 of them. Like we're going to cover all 6 of them in 2 different messages, but different aspects
Okay,
of them.
sure.
So this first week in week 2, what's going to happen is actually from Eddie's research and what he gathered, he has now been able to narrow in on there are 8 questions we can have people answer. And from those 8 questions, we can determine their generosity profile with 70% accuracy, which is like, to give you an example, with the 8 questions, like you could randomly guess somebody's with 16% accuracy. So that's quite a jump. You know, like you could just say, I could pick one for you, and 16% of the time I would right.
16% of the time it works.
So
every time.
to just use 8 questions and be able to go to 70%, that's pretty significant. So, I mean, we'll give the caveat that, you know, it's only so there is a chance that it might not get you right. So you need to listen to all 6
Right.
to figure that out.
But with only 8 questions, it feels like
we're going to do it right in the service.
it's something that could happen right there in the service.
Yeah, so the first time people are going to have, I think the first time they're going to have access, I don't think we'll tease it on social media ahead of time. The first time they're going to have...
we won't mean to.
We
but
won't
it might
mean to, it
accidentally
might happen. Is that we're going to actually have them take it right in service. And so hopefully that'll also raise the engagement level with them as we go through the descriptions. Because it'll be tricky to get through all descriptions and not make it feel like you're sitting in some kind of college class.
Sure.
You know?
Right, yeah.
So we'll have to come up with an engaging way to present those. I will mention, so here in the map we have those. There is some talk about possibly needing to tweak the names of these, so just know that as you go into your brainstorm, some of the names might...
It's a little wet cement.
Yeah, it is a little wet cement. But what we are going to focus on in this week 2 is having people take that to identify their profile, a brief overview of the profile, and what is the core motivation in that profile, like what motivates that person to be generous, and that's different for every profile. We may try to look, I don't know if we'll have time to do this for all of them, but we may look for, like, how do we match that with a scriptural example of someone with that motivation, and you know, and how that motivation reflects the image of God. But really this week is, our hope for this week is that people walk out of there going, like, encouraged.
Right.
That it's, you know, that...
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in this series, we want to be challenging people to generosity, and we have a big offering on the 3rd week, which is going to be a huge challenge offering. But really, we want them to walk away going, you know, I this is me, and I have this wiring in this way, and that that's a reflection of the image of God in me, and that's something to be celebrated.
Right.
So we want them to be encouraged by that in this week.
Celebrated and shared too. I would suspect that
Yeah.
there's lots of opportunity in small group exploration
To talk
too, to
about
be
that.
able to talk about that, and maybe helps level the playing field with some people who don't feel like they can contribute to that conversation or are afraid to.
Yeah.
Again, it's the let me talk about me sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
if I take this
absolutely.
test. All right.
So look at that, 5 pages.
Oh, gosh, I'm gonna sprain something. Week 3 then. We're
Is
celebrating one.
Celebrating one.
It's a big gift Sunday, and as a result, we're focusing in on being generous
Yes.
together.
And normally, if there were no other factors, we might go from week 2 to what is actually week 4.
Gotcha.
And save generous together for the last week of the series.
Sure.
But if you're looking at that and wondering why we made this choice, primarily it's because March 18th is actually the official end of one.
Right.
And also, we want to end with this big offering. And week 4, March 25th, is actually spring break.
Sure.
It's
Spring
Palm
break
Sunday. It's the
for
week before
a
Easter.
A lot of schools, yeah. So you've got the potential that you would be celebrating something that not enough people would be
We're there
in
for.
attendance.
Yeah. So we decided to go ahead, even though it kind of is a little bit weird, to break away from the profile specifically. And this is looking at, okay, we are all wired in these different ways, but when we join together, look at what this amazing things that can happen. And honestly, a lot of what we're looking at, both from a scriptural standpoint and some of the things that we're thinking about for this week, will be a very similar reflection to what happened 2 years ago when we launched the One Initiative. So we're going back to what was the core passage from Acts 4, specifically the way it's said in the message.
Yeah.
And so, looking back on it, I think the message was called One Church back when we first launched the first week of the One Initiative. And so this
will echo that in a
it's
very
going to have
significant way.
a lot of that, of what happens when we are one together.
That's awesome. No, it's exciting, and I think that there's definitely a lot to share. I think not jumping too far ahead into brainstorm land, but I do think that because we have video, of the journey of the 2 years, I suspect that there will be quite a bit that we're using video to help tell the story of this 2-year journey and what it's meant for people, and I think as we get closer to that, we'll know a little bit more about that. But that's exciting. Generosity together. I actually think it's pretty cool to have like kind of this
A little break.
Well, and also it's like, okay, we've created some separation, right, with us by defining these 6 different, characteristics.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there's a little bit of that individual, and like you said, it's like I want to talk about me, or like let's figure out my thing. But then to really remind us all that yes, it's an individual personality thing, but it's the whole point is to be
It has power
together
when we come together with it.
Yeah, so I actually like that. I think it's great.
Okay, never mind everything I said before. We did this on
No. It's by design. That's why we wanted week 4 to be Palm Sunday, and in no way indicate it or celebrate it.
Yes.
Because what is that? That's like branches.
Yeah.
Got to bring in the branches.
I
No
don't
branches.
know where we can fit those in.
Well,
Anyway.
it's growing in generosity, so maybe we just start with a couple little baby palms that grow.
And by the end of the service, they're really big. All right. We'll do magic.
Are we still filming? Still filming.
Oh,
Okay, good.
oh.
Week 4
Oh, okay,
then
week
is
4.
growing in generosity.
Yes, and we grow as we stretch ourselves beyond our genetic generosity. And this passage here in 2 Corinthians, the key verse really is where verse 7, where Paul is challenging this. He's challenging this church in this whole section of generosity, but he's saying, like, you challenge yourself to grow in so many ways, in faith and knowledge and love and all these things. He says, see to it that you also excel in this grace of giving. And so in this week, we're going to return back to the profiles, and probably what we're going to suggest maybe as you're building services in that too is that you go ahead and have people do the 8 questions, like that's in the host moment.
Sure.
Like, so you up front, and so you're encouraging
take the
people
test,
to maybe do that so that when we dive back into these, if they have not done it yet. But in this week, we almost, whenever you take a profile test or something like Strength Finders, they always tell you, your strengths and the things you can celebrate in that. But then they always have like these cautions or the shadow side or the things you got to look out for, and maybe how you can
when that
grow
goes too far, or when when you're running too specifically in that lane.
Yeah, and so this week is going to be a little bit more on that side of it. We're going to say, okay, we've already celebrated like all this great stuff, but let's, each one of these has a caution with it too. And again, these cautions are based on the research, the data that Eddie has gathered, because he looked at things even like for example, the disciplined doer is somebody that is very committed to giving and wants to do what's right and is so like in that. But what he found in the survey that he had is those people, like they tend to be generous and they're on track with things, but they sometimes are people then that are much lower in actually serving in the church or actually developing relationships with people they're blessing, which are other aspects of being generous,
right?
As well. Right. And so there are some.
The letter of the law kind of danger.
Yeah. So there are some like different cautions like that, or the I think one thing that's interesting from the research, but maybe not that surprising, the legacy builders are the ones that tend to have the most resources and but they're the most stressed out and the most anxious about money, and actually are the lowest percentage givers. And so, the challenge is that it's just, the caution is they've been given so much, but they like sometimes can be so shackled by that blessing. And so
needing to find the freedom.
Yeah. And needing to have, they're also the group that thinks the most about leaving an inheritance to their kids, but maybe they need to be challenged to think about, okay, yes, that's good, but how can you think about leaving a legacy that goes beyond that even? So there's different cautions and encouragements with each profile, and this is the week that we're going to challenge people to think about stretching themselves and excel in the grace of giving beyond what they just naturally are wired to do.
Wow. All right. No, I love it.
All right.
And then, the next week is Easter. And
Yeah.
boom, we're already at Easter.
Gosh, it feels like we haven't even gone through Christmas,
Yeah,
and it's
we
already
haven't
time
even
for
had
Easter.
Christmas. Yeah, that's funny how that works. Easter is April Fool's Day, by the way. Did you know that?
Are you trying to trick me?
No, it's really true. It's really true. The trick will be whether or not we actually plan a service that day. All right, well, Genetically Generous, I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. And it's definitely one of those things where, if we shy away from this stuff, if we act like it's, if we're worried, if we're in a posture of,
Apologizing.
apologizing or avoiding, we're not doing ourselves any favors, and we're really not presenting the material in a way that really, it's in line with Scripture, it's in line with who God is, and so we don't have to be afraid of it. We don't have to apologize for it.
Read what Paul was saying.
Yeah,
to
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that whole passage is good. You should memorize that whole darn thing. But yeah, so I'm excited about it. I feel good.
I
feel
do
really
too.
good at the end of
Are
all
you
this.
like
Am I
jovial?
I don't know if I might be more jovial. Yeah.
You're at least on the
Although
uptick?
it was a little tough. I'm on the uptick, but you're talking about these cautions. It kind of
It kind of brought you down at the
a
end.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are encouragements there, so it's it's a love sandwich. It's good. All right. Well, this has been the Big Idea podcast. I hope you've got lots of brainstorms ahead that create awesome weekend services and small group experiences. And that's it. I'm Eric Bramlett with Tammy Melchien, and we will see you
guys.
later. So long, everybody.